Hey folks, Roland Martin here. Coming up next on Roland Martin Unfiltered, live from Jackson, Mississippi on this Tuesday, November 20th, 2018. We break down the Senate race in this state. Mike Espy running against Cindy Hyde-Smith. Got some breaking news in terms of major companies pulling their donations to Hyde-Smith because of her public hanging comments. And we'll also on the show hear from Mayor Lumumba, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. Also actress Aunjanue Ellis. Plus we'll also hear from Mike Espy. Today he was actually at a pastor's prayer rally right here in this room, and so we'll hear from them as well. Plus Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina will join us talking about the race for leadership in the U.S. House. And we also talk with the head of the National Medical Association. Yesterday, a black doctor was gunned down at a hospital in Chicago by her former fiance. Domestic violence leads to the death of several people in Chicago. We'll have those details as well. Folks, we've got a packed show from Mississippi. Also joining me on the show will be the daughter of Medgar Evers, talking about the importance of voting. And I'll show you when I visited the home of Medgar Evers, where he was assassinated on June 12, 1963. It is time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah.
All right, folks, 7 days before the U.S. Senate race in Mississippi takes place on November 27th, pitting former Department of Agriculture Secretary Mike Espy against a Republican incumbent Cindy Hyde-Smith. It is a race where internal polls show Espy is within striking distance of Cindy Hyde-Smith. 944,000 people voted on November 6th for the three candidates. Espy and Hyde-Smith were the top two in that particular campaign, and you had more than 300,000 folks who actually voted for Espy, putting him in the top three. It is a battle for votes trying to replace Thad Cochran, of course, who retired due to health reasons. And so earlier today, pastors had a rally here in this ballroom where I'm at. We're going to show you some of that a little bit later. But here's some other details that's happening, news that came out today. This morning, Walmart announced that they wanted their money back. They had donated several $1,000s to Cindy Hyde-Smith's campaign. But after the backlash from her public hanging comment, they said those comments are not consistent with the values of Walmart or its customers. They want their money back. In addition to some other companies, Union Pacific, Boston Science, have also asked for their contributions to come back. In addition to that, there's a new photo that's going online with Cindy Hyde-Smith dressed in Confederate gear. This was shot in 2014. It was posted on Facebook, and this is what she said, quote, "Mississippi history at its best." Well, the reality is, if you're black, it was not its best when it comes to the Confederate. Of course, you might remember Jefferson Davis was a United States Senator from Mississippi, and he left the Senate to become leader of the Confederate. Well, we call him America's greatest domestic terrorist, but Mississippi is very much in love with their Confederate history. In fact, Governor Phil Bryant declared April to be Confederate History Month. Yeah, and also this is the same state that continues to have the Confederate symbol in their state flag, on the state's flag, the last state in the Union to do so. As I said earlier today, more than 300 pastors were in this room meeting to show their support for Mike Espy and his campaign. They also got their marching orders in terms of what they wanted them to do. And so we're going to show you a couple of those videos. So first off, let's go ahead and play that first video from earlier today, folks, at the pastors' meeting here in Jackson, Mississippi.
You know that we're going to be debating tonight, God willing, in about 5-6 hours. Yeah, man. And that thing is strange because, you know, after the election, they didn't think that we would be in the running. You know, they thought that this thing would be over. Yeah, yeah. You know that they had all hotel rooms already booked out to go back to Washington. But you said, with your prayers, and with your votes and your support, you told them not so fast. Not so fast. Mississippi's got to change. Mississippi got to change. We have no more time to wait. Yeah, man. We had someone to make these statements, and you know what they were. I'm not going to repeat them. Yeah, man. Her statements went viral in the last 5 minutes after she said it. Everybody heard it. Yeah, man. They heard it at Jackson State about suppression. Yeah. They heard it at Rust. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. About the other school. They heard it at Alcorn. Is that the liberal college she talking about, Betty? I don't know. Everybody heard it. But also the corporations heard it. And the good folks of Mississippi of Goodwill heard it. And everybody knows that we don't want to go back. So tonight I'm going to be thinking about the veterans and the seniors and the students and those infirmed and those who just want to do it better and those who are not going back. And I'm going to think about somebody else. I'm going to be thinking about my mama. Now, she is gone to glory. But my mama, I remember her. She taught me and my twin sister how to read and a chalkboard in the kitchen because we couldn't go to a public school in Yazoo City. And you know why. I'll be thinking about my mama who went downtown Yazoo City to try on a dress. And on the so I told her, Willie Jean, if you try it on, you got to buy it. Because those who coming behind you, they may not want to try on what you just tried on. And I remember when she went to the shoe shop, Roland, and she said, I want to try on these shoes. And I said, well, Willie Jean, If you got to try them on, you got to buy them. Because they may not fit you and nobody's coming behind you. So I'm going to be thinking about Willie Jean. I'm going to be thinking about your mamas and your daddies. I'm going to be thinking about my matriarch, Fannie Lou Hamer, who fought and bled and died in Rouville, Mississippi. You know, when I decided to run back in March, I didn't know that whatchamacallit was running. I didn't know who was running. But I decided to pay a visit to Rouville. And you know, she's buried in Rouville, and she's got a big statue there. I'm talking about Fannie Lou. And Roland, we had I was by myself. I didn't have drivers. I didn't have staff. Nobody but me. And I went to her gravesite, and if you haven't been there lately, it's surrounded by a chain link fence. And it was locked. I was surprised it was locked because it was a Saturday afternoon, but nobody was there. And so I'm going to admit something to you tonight. I got a little screwdriver out of my car. And I picked a lock because I wanted to be with her alone. And that gate opened. And I closed it behind me, and I put some money in the collection box so they could fix the lock that I just broke. I said, Betty Lou, this is Mike. Mike. You're the one that ran for Congress in 1964. Knowing that you could not be elected. But yet you had to be the lodestar. You had to be the signal. You had to be the person that people like me would come behind. I said, I want to do it again. I want to try to do it again. I need your strength. I need your prayer. I need your spirit. This thing is not easy. We got 82 counties. I mean, the second district is hard enough. There's 82 counties, and some of them have not welcomed me. I felt, Roland, a little twinge, a flicker of a spirit in my soul. And Fannie Lou said, go on and get it. Go on and get it.
Now, folks, this rally was called by Pastor Jerry Young. He is the head of the National Baptist Convention USA. He also leads the church where Mike Espy has been a member for more than 30 years. Last week, he and I talked, and he said, Roland, if you're going to come to Mississippi, I would love for you to address these pastors. And so I did.
Is a different state in a different place when it comes to our people. When I landed on Sunday night, got my rental car and was driving and waiting on my crew to land 2 hours later. What I initially thought of is not what was I going to eat. I thought about when Harry Belafonte talked about him and Sidney Poitier coming to Mississippi and then them being chased from the airport. I think about so many of our ancestors before us in terms of the role that they played, if they were willing to do what was necessary, even though they knew they were not going to see the fruits of their labor. See, what I understand is when I listen to certain people who want to lead, what I look for, people often talk about who was a Moses, who was a Joshua, but see, I look for modern day Nehemiahs. I look for people who have chosen to survey the land and see that the wall has crumbled, and then they come up with a plan of action to then say how to rebuild that wall, because, see, the wall protects the folks who are inside of the wall. And see, you remember, see, Nehemiah went around and he actually looked at the wall and said, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. But if you read it again, it says the people said, let us rebuild. Let us do it, Doc. Didn't say let Nehemiah rebuild. Then, of course, as you keep reading the next chapter, you begin to read it where it begins to say that also Nehemiah said, and look, there are going to be some haters, some people who say that you can't make this happen. And I've already heard from some haters who say there's no way in the world a black man could somehow be elected in Mississippi. Oh, he black and Democratic? You've lost your mind. But see, Nehemiah said there will be haters. And he said, ignore the haters, keep working. Yeah, man. And then, of course, when the haters then saw the wall was being rebuilt, they then said, oh, no, we got to stop that from happening. And so they began to attack them. Nehemiah said two things: keep one hand on your weapon and the other hand still working. But the most important thing about when you read Nehemiah is not just the vision, not just what he said, that you got to keep building and there will be haters. The most important part is if you actually begin to read that carefully, it lays out the people who built this portion of the wall. See, which means that if you on one part of this state, you cannot be concerned about the other part of this state, because if you're ignoring the wall right in front of you, then you are losing sight. See, they could not rebuild the wall if the people right in front didn't build their portion of the wall. And the person next to them build their portion of the wall. And the person next to them, they'll build their portion of the wall. The reality is no wall can be built if you don't do what's right in front of you. Which means that no one can win if you can't mobilize and organize just where you are. Which means that if you can't organize yourself, organize your family, organize your street, organize your block, organize your neighborhood, organize your city, then you will not be able to rebuild the wall. It requires those of us to have a vision, to follow modern day Nehemiahs, and then to do our part to rebuild the wall just in front of us. See, if we don't, then we have nobody but to blame ourselves. If we don't, we can't say it's somebody across town because we didn't do your part. I dare say the only way we can actually be truly effective, the only way we can honor our ancestors, the only way we can actually make a change for the better, if people of conscience, people of faith, people of African descent have the willingness and the guts to stand up and fight and look folk in the eye and say, you can say anything you want about public hangings, you can joke about voter suppression, or you can make all these other different comments, but you are not going to withstand the kind of pressure that we're going to bring to bear on you when it comes to our future, when it comes to what is happening, when it comes to what is needed, that we are going to fight and fight and fight, and like Frederick Douglass said, agitate, agitate, agitate. And then you also must follow what my frat brother Vertner Woodson Tandy, one of our 7 jewels, said to the Brothers of Alpha in 1937 when he said we need more brothers dealing with the issue of the Negro problem. He looked them in the eye and said, brothers, we will fight until hell freezes over, and then we will fight on the ice.
All right, folks. Again, 7 days before folks go to the polls here in Mississippi, lots of attention. But the importance of voting for African Americans is not new to this particular state. You heard Mike Espy refer to Fannie Lou Hamer in that particular speech. Also, one of the folks who was very much involved in the battle for civil rights and voting rights was, of course, Medgar Evers. He was the field secretary for the NAACP here in Mississippi, Army veteran, who was assassinated in his driveway as a result of his fight for the rights for African Americans. And joining us right now is his daughter, Rena Denise Evers. Did your whole Gutman name, your whole Gutman name. Your mama would be happy for me to hear that. First of all, how is your mother, Merle Evers Williams?
She says hello. She is doing much better. She's very happy to know that I get to see you face to face, and so I'll give you a hug afterwards from her.
All right, I certainly appreciate
and she
that.
Said, keep going with what you're doing.
Absolutely, will do. So let's talk about, again, that importance of voting. I tweeted a photo when I dropped by 2332 yesterday, and I said, your father gave his life. And someone said, no, Roland, his life was taken from him. I said, no. I said, you don't understand. I said, folks like your dad knew what they were facing. Yeah. And they knew what they were coming after. They knew the folks who they had a bullseye on their back, because they dared to say the freedoms that he fought for in the United States Army, for other folk, black folks deserve those same freedoms.
Exactly. And, you know, thank you for saying 2332 Guine Street, even though it's Margaret Walker Alexander now, which is wonderful because it's named
now, what was it called then?
Guines.
Guines. Spell it? What?
G-U-Y-N-E-S.
Ah, that was a street. That was the name of the street then.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Right.
Okay.
But Margaret Walker Alexander lived up the street.
Ah, so the street was renamed
after her.
Got it. Okay,
yes,
cool. All right.
Which is wonderful to know now, but as a kid, you didn't know who all was up on the street and who was in the neighborhood, like Constance Motley. You know, talking about given his life, they have, the civil rights activists and other activists, given their lives as opposed to being it taken away. You know, from a personal daughter view, it was taken away as a kid. But as you get older and you understand all that they were doing, especially my father was doing, he knew what he was doing, just like you said. And they knew what they were doing. The threats that came in all the time into the house, the threats that came to us in person, was critical in shaping my father's steps. Because he knew that he was putting not only himself in danger, but his family in danger. But as he said in an article in Ebony, you know, he lives in Mississippi, and he won't leave Mississippi because this is where it starts. It starts of not just reconciliation, but understanding of respect and rights, God-given rights. And so going through being taken, God takes you, but also what I know for sure is God gave him his mission, and he was fulfilling his mission.
It has to drive you crazy, knowing full well what your dad was doing, and to hear people say, I don't vote, it means nothing to me, or this is a waste of time, voting changes nothing. I had somebody post earlier something Malcolm X said. I said, well, first of all, dude, you can't even remotely talk about what Malcolm X was saying in 1960 or 61 or 62, 63, when black people were still trying to even get their right to vote. And so how does that has to irk you, knowing full well just the hell that your dad went through and your family went through and black folks went through just to be able to register and have folks say, man, this is a waste of my time.
Not just to register, but to pass the test that they had to pass at that time. Yes, it more than irks me. And actually, I have a couple of friends who of different ethnic backgrounds that have said that to me. Well, Rena, I'm sorry to say this to you, but, you know, I'm not going to vote. And I said, and why not? Well, what does it matter? I said, one vote counts. One vote counts in a lot. I said, does your life matter to you? Do you know what your rights are? First of all, you are privileged at this time, and I use that word very lightly. You're privileged at this time to be able to walk wherever you want to walk, to be able to go into a restaurant of your choosing, to be able to go, as I heard Mike Espy said earlier, try on clothes in the high-end stores without being told to go out or told that you can't try on. You have to buy it and you can't return it. You have to, you know, gauge what your clothes size would be in order to get it, or be totally refused to be able to go into the store. And that's what happened. And what irks me, really gets to me, is that people think that this was centuries ago. This happened my lifetime. I'm 60 years old. And I'm 63 years old, and I'm proud of it.
Right. Your mama proud when she give her age. Go
yes,
ahead.
she is. Yes. And so what irks me is that, do you realize what is happening now happened then? You're not that far removed. That's really 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Your parents, your grandparents lived through this. You're living in a day where you have the opportunity to understand what's going on by technology. Most people carry around cell phones. Cell phones are little computers. Little computers that give you the knowledge that all you have to do is say, hey, Google, ask about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Mm-hmm. Ask about slavery. What are those amendments about? Reconstructive, right after civil rights. The Civil War. That was the whole purpose of civil rights, of the movement. And the movement started not in the 1900s. It started actually right after this country in 1700s, the late 1700s, early 1800s. So my real concern, not my real concern, my focus, and so many of us are about educating about why you need to do this. You need to understand that what so many people died for because of their beliefs and their commitment to you in this generation, in next generation, that should make an impact on you. You should want to go out and give your voice to what your life is about. You pay taxes. Now, some of you might say you don't pay taxes, but everybody pays taxes. You pay sales tax, don't you? So where do those sales taxes go to? They go to what the government decides is going to be good for you or not. What programs, the younger children are not being able to have after-school programs. They're not going to be able to have programs that they consider electives. Mm-hmm. So those taxes are being utilized for what? And so I just, to go back to, does it irk me? It has a fire in me that it had, I believe, in my father, in Amzie Moore, in Sam Bailey, in Vernon Damer, in Fannie Lou Hamer, and so many, because they were at the podium all the time. It didn't have to be a podium in front of a large audience. It was each and every one, and that's what we have to do, to educate about your rights.
And look, earlier today, again, at the Pastor's Prayer Rally, they announced about 944,000 folks had voted, and that they were seeing numbers voting in this race that were comparable or even higher than when Obama ran. So you got black folks in Mississippi who are energized, but clearly for Mike Espy to win, he's going to need a very, very high turnout of people in order to do so. And so I just want folks to understand it's not like people are ignoring this, but the reality is, again, for me, I'm still a firm believer that even one person sitting at home, not using their power, to me, it makes no sense whatsoever.
It doesn't even make sense, because in a year after a bill's been passed, whether it's about your health, whether it's about your housing, whether it's about school, your school debts, it's going to affect every single person. So sitting and waiting for a major election, such as a presidential election, does not help us at all in the everyday life that we're living. And so you need to be going out and voting when it comes to your local officials, when it comes to your state officials, and all the government officials. And so this race is critical. The race all this year in a lot of different states have been critical, because things are going backwards at an amazing rate that it feels like I'm back in a mass meeting with my dad, and he's talking about your rights and what you need to learn and what you need to do. So we have to get out, not only the vote, we have to get out the ones that are sitting, as you said, in the armchair going, okay, let me look at this election, let me see what it's doing. There's too many waiting to see. And you keep waiting, and we won't have.
All right, then.
Okay. I just, if you mind,
go
if
ahead.
I can just say one thing, and
Yeah.
I go by my dad, his wisdom, and it amazes me when I go back and read some of his speeches. What's so prevalent now? And I'm like, here we go again, but it's so prevalent. And so I just would like to just read this one thought.
Yeah.
And I have this on my website. But although great strides in the field of human relations have been made, we cannot give up now. But rather, it is necessary from this day forward that we take increased devotion, lest those precious rights we have gained be taken away. Let it not be said of us when history records these momentous times that we slept while our rights were taken by those who would keep us in slavery, by those who say that we are doing all right. And that speaks volumes now, and that was done in April 20th, 1961. So that's valid now. So those of you who are out there hearing this, don't sleep away your rights. Go out and vote. Take at least 30 people with you, or make sure that they go out and vote so our rights will be in a solid foundation in this nation.
Medgar Evers, always good to see you.
Love you.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, then, folks. Speaking of the issue of voting, that's what House Democrats are going to be doing very soon for their leadership. Of course, Nancy Pelosi, she wants to return as Speaker of the House. Steny Hoyer of Maryland, he wants to be the House Majority Leader. And my next guest is running again to be Majority Whip. Joining us right now from South Carolina is Jim Clyburn. Congressman Clyburn, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Roland. How are you? So good to hear from you.
Doing great. Well, first of all, certainly I do want to get your thoughts before we talk about the House leadership vote. I do want to get your thoughts about Mike Espy running here in Mississippi. You, of course, civil rights leader in South Carolina. You remember Medgar Evers very well, the fight the black folks had to vote in Mississippi, and just your initial thoughts about his campaign.
I do remember all of that very well, and it's kind of interesting to hear the previous guest talk about 1961, the year I graduated from South Carolina State. Also, the year I went to jail for my final time. And it was all about trying to get the right to vote off the back of the bus into making individual decisions based upon whatever you were capable of, rather than because of your skin color. And to see what is happening now, new Supreme Court decisions gutting the Voting Rights Act, new judges being appointed, judges who make it very clear in their writings and their speeches that they will turn the clock back if given the opportunity. And one of the checkmates to all of that is the Mike Espy race down there in Mississippi. If Mike Espy were to win this election, I think a week from today, he would be standing in the gap of whether or not these right-wing judges will continue to be appointed to the United States Supreme Court. I am hopeful that people in Mississippi will turn out in record numbers, something similar to what the people in Alabama did when they stopped Judge Moore. And things are lining up for that to be the case. Judge Moore made who he was and still is, I suppose, very clear in things he did and things he said. And people were incensed by it. And a lot of people who would have ordinarily voted for him were insulted by it. And the ingredients were there for us to win that victory. What we just heard, this senator have to say about making a joke about a public hanging. And I understand rather than apologize, she doubled down. And other things have come out that she has said. And I venture to say it was a bullhorn rather than a dog whistle. That is, you can't have a louder bullhorn than that, than to talk about a public hanging and try and never apologize for it. She was sending a signal to various people there in Mississippi, and one of them responded almost immediately, writing her a check for $2,700, which is all the law will allow him to make. I'm told within a couple of days of that statement, that check came from one of the most right-wing people in Mississippi, and I think that's why she said it, in order to the gender reaction from that element. So I'm calling upon the people of Mississippi to really get out to the polls in record numbers. Now that Walmart has now stepped up and demand their money back for the contributions they made to her, I just believe that there are enough people being insulted by this for us to be incented to the extent that we'll get out and vote.
Congressman, I got to ask you this question here. Politico is now reporting that your fellow Congressional Black Caucus member, Marcia Fudge of Ohio, who was considering running against Nancy Pelosi to be the Speaker of the House, she has decided not to, that she is going to endorse the Speaker. She said that she is being promised by Pelosi to work to protect voting rights and assure her that, quote, the most loyal voting bloc in the Democratic Party, black women, will have a seat at the decision-making table. Just your thoughts on, so this clearly, so although you have individuals out there who are trying to keep Nancy Pelosi from getting those 218 votes, no one individual has stepped up. Just your thoughts on Marcia Fudge throwing her support behind Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi.
Marcia Fudge is probably one of the most articulate, thoughtful people that I ever sat down with. And I sit down with her often. I've been on the phone with Marcia quite a bit over the last several days. She told me on I think it was yesterday or the day before, that she had been given great thought to how she should move forward, and that she thought that she was going to move away from any thought of running herself, that she really believed that Nancy Pelosi would keep the agenda that she feels is important out in the forefront of our caucus, because she is very, very interested in voting rights. I've seen Marcia Fudge just get very emotional when she talks about how the 1965 Voting Rights Act was gutted. When she talks about diversity, Marcia was very, very engaged in Stacey Abrams' campaign down there in Georgia. And she called me when she saw that statistic that indicated that 76% of white women in Georgia voted against Stacey Abrams. She was really upset about that. She said that, you remember down in Alabama, 98% of black women voted for Doug Jones. And then on the other side of the coin, around 56 or 58% of white women voted for Judge Moore. Marcia was upset about that. I mean, really very emotional about it. And she really wanted to see our caucus move forward forthrightly on diversity issues, on restoring the Voting Rights Act, on doing what is necessary for those people who have been so loyal to the party. I saw a study released on yesterday, someone sent it to me last night, that indicated this whole blue wave was really jump-started by the black vote. Yet you don't see a whole lot of credit being given to that. A lot of people don't realize there will be 9 additional African Americans serving in the Congress this time. Come January, if all goes well. And so Marcia Fudge really was upset by some of the language, some of the comments that she heard, and people not giving proper credit to what African Americans have done with the Democratic Party. And that's what had her really concerned. But she told me on yesterday that after giving it great thought over the weekend and discussing it with her family, that she was not going to move forward in the challenge to Nancy Pelosi, but that she had some discussions with Nancy. I think it's been publicized. They met before we left Washington on Friday. And then after mulling over that, she decided that she's going to vote for Nancy, going to support Nancy, and I think she says going to support the ticket of Pelosi, Hoyer, and Clyburn.
Well, we certainly will see what takes place there. Again, we know that you're running to be the majority whip, Congressman Clyburn. Glad to have you. Can't wait to have you back in studio to spend some time with us. Of course, we are down here in Jackson, Mississippi, covering all the angles. And I hear you, but I tell you what, there's at least one show that gives black folks credit for what took place on November 6th, and that's Roland Martin Unfiltered, which is why we here, because there are no black news shows on black cable news networks. There are no other shows that's blacker than we are, and that's why we're here, to be sure to tell our story so nobody else is controlling the narrative.
Well, thank you so much for doing that. You've always been upfront with that. You've never been ashamed or in any way abashed to really tell it like it is, and I really appreciate you for that. And thank you so much for doing that. And I hope that your listeners down there will respond in a way that will make us all of us, proud to be Americans. I've been saying throughout this campaign that overarching everything this year, we can talk about health care, affordable housing, student loan debt. These are big things. But overarching all of this, I think, is America's goodness, the basic goodness that we always had, even when it was a lot of inequality. There's been a basic goodness about people. The guy in the White House today is sowing seeds of discontent, discord, and it's going to be disastrous if we don't check him. And the best way to check him is to send an African American from Mississippi to the United States Senate. That would send a signal like none other to date.
Congressman Jim Clyburn, we appreciate it, sir. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I want to go to my panel right now. Spencer Overton, he's the president of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. Malik Abdul, Republican communications consultant, and he also, of course, is a native of Mississippi. I want to start with you, Malik. We'll go to the news of all these companies, Walmart, these other companies pulling their money, Boston Scientific, pulling their money from Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith because of that public hanging comment. That comment has gotten lots and lots and lots of attention here in Mississippi, Malik.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Most of my family, as I said, are Democrats. Actually, all of my family are Democrats, and so they are hot about the comments that Cindy made. I said on the show here that I didn't agree with her comments, and I thought that she should have came out with a much more forceful, an apology first, and a much more forceful one at that. Whether or not it really affects the outcome of the race, I really don't know if we're going. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. But the fact that Walmart and some of the other companies pulled, are asking for money back or something, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all.
Spencer, you are the author of the book Stealing Democracy, New Politics of Voter Suppression. And the bottom is this here. We know that voters, whether you are white, whether you're black, whether you're Latino, people respond to things in a much different way. And the reality is, in the sense that I've gotten being on the ground since Sunday, is that black folks have been very energized and very focused as a result of that public hanging comment. You have others who say, look, she knew exactly what she was saying. Of course, her also joking about voter suppression. her campaign, saying that was edited out of context. Yet the student who they used, her campaign posted a photo of that student to try to say, oh, I was talking to a couple of black students. That student said, don't you dare use me for your campaign purposes. And so, again, yes, the polling shows that Highsmith is in the lead, but the reality is a strong black turnout could make Tuesday night very, very interesting.
That's right, Roland. And you know, just to lay this out, this is the blackest state in the country, right? Over 38% of residents in Mississippi are black, and they're woefully underrepresented in terms of the congressional delegation. Only one of the 4 members of the House are black. Benny Thompson, a great member, but only one of 4. And then in the U.S. Senate, there's been no black representation. So folks are certainly overdue, and it's all about turnout. So in terms of if you've got friends, if you've got family in Mississippi, you need to get on the phone and call them and tell them to get out and vote.
Let's shift to, of course, the news of Congresswoman Marcia Fudge choosing not to run for Speaker of the House. Bottom line is, Spencer, is everybody scared of Nancy Pelosi?
Right, that's right. Now, you'll remember that the situation we're in is that Nancy Pelosi has a lot of votes, but she doesn't have enough Democratic votes to get across the line in January, because there are a lot of Democratic members who, when they were running, they said, we're not going to support Nancy Pelosi. So we'll see how this works out. Another important thing we didn't talk much about when you had him on is Clyburn. You know, he'll be number 3 in the House. You know, just a sage, incredibly smart. He'll be the highest ranking black person in the United States government if he becomes a Democratic whip.
Malik, again, look, competition is important, and the fact that you have these folks who don't want to vote for Nancy Pelosi, they've got nobody to vote for because no one has publicly said they're going to run against Nancy Pelosi.
You know, I was listening to Clyburn and some of the other discussions that they've been having about this this race, and for me, I look at it and I say to myself, you know, this is exactly one of the reasons that I left the Democratic Party. Because as you see, Marcia Fudge has no support. The Congressional Black Caucus, the largest caucus in the House, she wants to run and she gets no support. And it's reminiscent to me.
No, hold up. No, that is not true.
Well,
it is not true that she does not get any.
Okay, well,
Malik,
that was an exaggeration. Yeah.
Malik, I've talked to congressional members. Marcia Fudge does have support, but one of the decisions as to why folks are not running is if they don't believe they can get 218, they're saying, I'm not going to make a run for it. But that's just not true.
Okay, yeah, and I apologize for that. I shouldn't have exaggerated the number, but the idea is that she still doesn't have the support. She has some support, but she doesn't have enough support to win. And here we are for the CBC, and I think I read somewhere that members of the CBC weren't even fully behind her. How can you not be fully behind someone, you know, a member of your own caucus? And this is the problem that Democrats have. You know, even if we're talking about the race down there in Mississippi, Mike Espy started running in March. Thanks, Joe Biden, for showing up in November? You know, I appreciate the natural interest in the race, but the reality is that Mike Espy has been running since March, and he's had no support from the larger Democratic Party. They weren't interested in talking about Mike Espy because they were more interested in talking about Gillum. They were more interested in talking about Abrams.
So now I got to push back on Malik on this House issue, right? And I got to push back because if you look at the Republicans in the House, I mean, we've been through speaker after speaker because it's such a difficult group to manage here. I mean, we basically have Paul Ryan leaving because it's just a difficult group to manage. With Nancy Pelosi, you've got someone, you know, certainly she's got her defectors here, but she does have a significant amount of support. She's raised over $100 million for the Democrats in terms of doing this. And so certainly I think the Republicans have been much more so cats scrambling every which way as opposed to the Democrats. And it takes real strength to hold so many different people in line.
Yeah, I'm not going to, I give Nancy credit. She's very talented. She's a skilled tactician. She's great. But the reality is that there sits Marcia Fudge, and she has no support. Well, she has very little support, and it doesn't seem like she has that from her caucus.
Okay, again, you have support there. It may be 60 to 100 votes, but you need 218. That's really what the issue there is. All right, folks, gentlemen, hold tight 1 second. I got to go to a break. And so I want to share a message from one of our partners, folks. As we transition into the holiday season, this is the time when people are starting thinking about giving and also sharing. And sometimes the best gift is when you actually present an opportunity to yourself. Give yourself your own gift. That's why our friends at Transatlantic Real Estate have created an investment opportunity for the everyday investor involving legal marijuana and crowdfunding. Now, we all know that legal marijuana has created one of the fastest growing industries in the country, no pun intended. Also know that crowdfunding makes it easy to be an early investor of an opportunity, but it gets even better. What Transatlantic is doing is different, and that is their business model is essentially buying the land that supports marijuana grow operations and leasing it to licensed, high-paying tenants. Now, what that means is you will be a landlord of a licensed marijuana farm in a high-growth market. Now, they're accepting investments for little as $300 up to $10,000 before the company goes public. Now, here's what's important. You must complete and confirm your application to participate. Again, complete your application and confirm your application to participate. Now, you can spend all your holiday money on gifts, but what if you get a return on your investment? You could also could consider making an investment for somebody else, and that could be their gift. That's a hell of a holiday gift. Now, to get started, go to marijuanastock.org, marijuanastock.org, for you to get into the game. And so we certainly want you to do so. All right, folks, time for our hashtag HBCU Giving Day University. Don't forget, you can go ahead and roll the graphic if you want to. Of course, it is Jackson State University, founded in October 23rd, 1877. One of its great graduates is Walter Payton, also Cornell William Brooks, former CEO of the NAACP, as well as Congressman Benny Thompson and Rod Page, former Secretary of Education for the United States. So as you support Jackson State, go to www.js.ums.edu, js.ums.edu. And graduates of Jackson State, we want you to also give back to help there. Folks, a tragic and sad story out of Chicago where a gunman killed 3 folks, including himself, yesterday at Chicago's Mercy Hospital. One of the folks was a Chicago cop, including a pharmacy technician, but the shooter came there to confront his ex-fiancée, Dr. Tamara O'Neal, 38 years old. She was described as dedicated to her church and her patients. She graduated from the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago just 2 years ago and had worked as a resident at Mercy for 2 years. Folks, she's now dead. She was shot repeatedly by a man with a history of bad behavior towards women. He also had a restraining order against him from his ex-wife. Now, he bought his gun legally and had a concealed carry permit, even though he had that level of history with domestic violence. Joining us right now is the president of the National Medical Association, the largest group of black doctors, Dr. Neva Lubin Johnson. She is there in Chicago, and she has been on the staff at Mercy Hospital for 30 years. Dr. Johnson, first of all, just such a sad story. And again, here you have this black woman becomes an emergency room physician. She's out there doing her best, and she loses her life because some guy has this constant issue with domestic violence.
Good evening, Roland, and thank you so much for having me this evening. It's truly a tragedy. I did not know her, but I wish I had. From what I've heard about her today, she is someone that I hope we all aspire to be. She was a leader in her church, director of her church choir, and also had a program where she donated school supplies to disadvantaged primary grade children, Dr. Tamara O'Neal. And so, my condolences to her and her family. My heart aches for all the families of those killed yesterday, but also to the patients, the staff, and my colleagues at Mercy Hospital.
You are calling on Governor-elect J.B. Pritzker to enact stricter gun control laws. Now, we know, of course, Chicago, they had their gun law that was challenged. I'm just trying to understand, how can this guy have this history when it comes to abusive behavior with women, yet was still able to buy a gun legally and get a concealed gun permit?
And I think that's one of the things that needs to be done. One of the things that needs to be done for sensible gun reform. I mean, somebody who had a restraining order taken out on them should not be given the honor and the privilege of being a gun owner. And I think that's one of the things that can be done. And I bet, I'm saying the legislature needs to pass some legislation that he can sign, so we'll have some sensible gun reform. Not only did he have this restraining order, but he also was cited, although not charged, for sending unending texts to an ex-girlfriend. And also, he was put out of the fire academy for aggressive behavior towards women.
Well, it is certainly an absolutely sad story. 3 people are dead. The gunman took his own life as well. And it is sickening to actually think about. And we certainly, our prayers certainly go to Dr. O'Neill's family, as well as the other folks who lost their lives as well. Dr. Johnson, will you keep us abreast of what happens with the governor-elect there? Anything we can do to help, please let us know.
I will definitely do that. And thank you again so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. God bless, and happy Thanksgiving to you and all your viewers.
Appreciate it. Malik, I want to start with you. Again, I know people out there, they love talking about the Second Amendment, how important it is. But when you have individuals out there who are abusive to women, who are dangerous to society, for this guy to somehow get a gun legally and to get a concealed gun permit, to me, is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, as someone who's, very pro Second Amendment, I grew up, in Jackson. My grandfather would drive around with his shotgun in the back of his truck because he was allowed to do it. So I'm definitely pro Second Amendment. But in this case, and what we're talking about in Chicago, the system failed. The system failed her. The system failed this, Chicago. I don't know. I know that Chicago is a very, as far as their gun restrictions, I do know that they were very restrictive with their guns, but this seems like we need to have a larger discussion, and we have these sort of things all the time. Each time something happens, we say to ourselves, okay, well, what are we going to do? But in this case, I mean, the guy bought the guns legally. And there has to be some sort of check before he's able to do that, some sort of mechanism. Even I'm saying this as a conservative, there needs to be a mechanism to prevent these type of things, because I would like to see what the NRA's statement on something like this is, because this is indefensible. Something failed, and it wasn't having, and the answer is not another person having a gun. Something failed to the fact that, to the idea that he even had the gun. So, I think that, they need to look into that. And whatever they can do, we don't need to have Americans around this country dying for something like this.
And Roland, the data shows that domestic violence is an indication of people who are likely and prone to commit gun violence. So certainly the Illinois law needs to be changed. One problem, though, in Illinois, and this is the reason that I think we differ on this. One reason we need federal regulation is because a lot of the deaths that happen in Chicago are a result of guns that are brought from Indiana, where there are fewer restrictions on guns.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yep, and that really is the problem there, those collar counties that are around Chicago. So it's really a sad story. Folks, I am broadcasting live from the ballroom here at the Marriott in Jackson, Mississippi, where earlier today there was a prayer rally for Mike Espy, who is running for the United States Senate. He's going to be debating Senator Sidney Hyde-Smith tonight in about an hour, and so we'll be sharing that on our streaming channels as well. But before that rally, I had a chance to sit down with the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, Chokwe Lumumba, of course, who succeeded his father, who was elected in 2014. Shortly thereafter, died of a heart attack. And he is considered the most radical mayor in the country. And he said he has a strong vision for this city. And so here's some of our conversation.
The first thing I want to start off with, we do have some breaking news. Walmart has announced that they want their donation back from Cindy Hyde-Smith as a result of the public outrage over her public hanging comments. Just your thought about them making that call today.
Well, I would commend them for that step. That's one step further than she has made for herself. After being made aware of the repulsive and offensive nature of her comments, which is more concerning than even the comments themselves, is her failure to acknowledge the insensitivity of them. And so to simply cast it away as an over-exaggerated phrase isn't sufficient. If I told you that I was gonna meet you on the moon, then that's an exaggerated phrase. But in a state that has the biggest and the history of having the most lynchings in this country, in a state where we still have present-day circumstances where lynchings are a matter of concern, to have the song of Nina Simone, Strange Fruit Hanging from Mississippi Trees, all of those things do not make an exaggeration in this space.
And when you, of course, she then said, well, that was a statement about, holding someone in personal regard. And I'm going, I don't quite recall hearing that statement anywhere. I've heard lots of different statements, not that one, by saying that if that person invited me to a public hanging, I'll be happy to be on the front row. Yeah,
that isn't anything that we use in my family or any circles that I am engaged in. And so it is an offensive, repulsive statement, and her failure to acknowledge that simply shows the type of mentality she would be returning to Washington with.
One of the things that has been quite interesting as I have talked to people, and I've seen this on social media as well, it's amazing to hear black folks say, Mike Espy has no shot whatsoever. And certainly understand the history of this state, understand it's a very red state, understand that, but it comes across as this complete defeatist attitude, as if there's just no way possible, it will never happen, when we can go back to folks in Virginia saying the exact same thing about Douglas Wilder, folks saying the exact same thing about Senator Barack Obama when he ran. There are people who run for mayor of certain cities, the exact same thing has happened. Can you speak to that in terms of trying to get black folks in this state to realize that if you look at the hardcore numbers and then black folks vote their power, it could actually happen?
Absolutely. I would actually suggest that as we see elections in Florida, we see the Stacey Abrams election in Georgia, and very proud of the efforts that both of those individuals gave. I would argue that a black candidate winning a statewide office in Mississippi, by its demographics alone, that Mississippi is a space where they could be even more viable. And so it requires that we speak to people's issues, that we speak to their concerns. And I believe that this is a very important election, and I believe that Mike can win it. If people get out, if people understand and vote their interest as opposed to just party lines. I would challenge someone in Mississippi as we're, seeing Cindy Hyde-Smith and a Republican Party beating the drum about a border wall. I'd ask someone in Mississippi, when was the last time that immigration was your problem? You've been the poorest state as long as I can remember, and no immigrant has taken your job. If it was your job, they couldn't take it in the first place. And so when we're talking about a candidate in Mike Espy who talks about health disparities, a very real circumstance in Mississippi, that's speaking to your interests. When you see a candidate who has experience in agriculture, being the former Secretary of Agriculture, and can talk about incentives for poor farmers and people who are trying to make the very best out of that type of economy, that speaks to your interests, and I hope that people vote their interests as opposed to just party lines.
All right. Mayor Lumumba, we certainly appreciate you sitting down with us and having this conversation. Glad to be back in your city, and certainly look forward to coming back next time.
Happy to have you here, brother.
All right,
Happy to have you.
All right, then. And first of all, folks, we're going to go a little bit over our time today. I want to thank Spencer and Malik for being on our panel today. I know we had quite a packed show, and so I thank both of you for being on the show. Again, folks, don't forget, I told you to be sure to get Spencer's book on voter suppression. You can get that on bookstore, Amazon, however you want to order it. And so, Spencer, Malik, thanks a bunch.
Thanks, and happy Thanksgiving.
And get you some Big Johns
Likewise,
while you're down
sir.
Roland.
All right, I'll try to do so. Folks, of course, also, in addition to talking to Aunjanue Lumumba, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, I caught up with a native of this particular state. She lives in Macomb, Mississippi. Actress Aunjanue Ellis. Of course, you see her on a number of television shows, including Designated Survivor, as well as starring in Ava DuVernay's upcoming movie on the Central Park 5 on Netflix. And here's a portion of our conversation.
When you hear black folks say, I don't care, he has no shot. It can't happen. It's a waste of time. How do you respond to that? Because I've actually heard that. Folks have actually said it to me. They're like, he has no shot. It's a waste. He can't win.
So in the face of that, you resort to acceptance? That's what you do? I mean, that's your strategy, is acceptance? I mean, what if Fannie Lou Hamer accepted her life as a sharecropper in Mississippi? The Democratic Party would not be what it is today if she did that. If we chose the route of acceptance, where would we be? I mean, I hear this all the time because I get very frustrated in the battles that I choose to fight because I feel like it's just me and a couple other people that's doing it. And folks tell me all the time, you know, Aunjanue, a lot of times in these movements, it was just a couple of people.
Yes.
Who were willing to show up with 2 or 3 touch and agree. You know, that's what essentially made a movement, because it was just a couple folks ready. Now, folks came out for the cameras, came out to be in the street because it was sexy. But the folks that were like really doing the work, it wasn't a whole lot of people doing that.
Well, the Bible does say the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few.
The laborers are few. The laborers are few. So I mean, and also I get that. I have a lot of empathy for that, because if you grow up here, and Mississippi is a culture of low expectations, not just for black folks, for everybody. It's a culture of low expectations. So if I grew up here, and one of the first things that we did before we got out of school, instead of we didn't even know about what the SAT was. We didn't know what the ACT was. I had the vocational counselor happened to be a black man, and we were down there talking to him one day about what, I have no idea. And he said to me and Veronica Stanberry, he said, have you guys taken the ACT yet? Have you guys taken the SAT? And we were in the 11th grade, and we said, what's that? What is that? But I tell you what we had taken. We had taken the ASVAB, and the ASVAB is the admission test for the military. So we were good enough to put our lives on the line, but not good enough to go to college, right? So a man intervened in that to show us that we had another path. If I had stayed on this path of what was Mississippi intended for me, I would not be sitting here talking to you right now. There's no way in the world. But I had to have these interventions that came in all these different sort of directions, because this is a culture of low expectations. And all those things, these symbols, these signs, these instructions that are here, that are everywhere. Everywhere you see a Cindy Hyde-Smith sign, you see a Confederate flag. And I'm very clear that Confederate flag, it is the Confederate flag, but it is the flag of the Ku Klux Klan. Because the Confederacy ended essentially in 1865, at the end of the Civil War. What took over?
And that flag was furled, and it was stored.
Yes.
And it disappeared for 2 generations. For folks who don't understand the history, the Democratic Party under Truman decided to have a strong position on civil rights. That was a meeting. That was a conference where that flag returned, and it was held in this state.
Yes.
The Southern Manifesto was written, and that meeting was held in this state in 1948, Well, that flag reappeared. It had been gone for 2 generations. And so when I hear all these people who talk about, well, no, there's no association with the Confederate flag and race, no.
Yeah.
It was a direct appeal. Southern Manifesto, the Democratic Party on the issue of civil rights, and then, of course, Brown versus Board of Education. Then, of course, all of these schools being named after Confederate leaders, that stuff happened after Brown versus Board of Education. It was all deliberate.
Yeah, it was absolutely deliberate. And that contributes to a culture. And that culture contributes to how people see themselves. And that how people see themselves is when they surrender and when they accept that that guy has no chance because, you know, he's running against a white woman.
All right, folks, if you want to see the full interviews with Lumumba as well as with Aunjanue Ellis, please go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. You can also subscribe to our channel and be sure to turn on your live notifications so every time that we go live, you will get notified. All right, folks, the final piece today from Mississippi. We, of course, I was talking to earlier with Rena Evers. Of course, she was there when her dad was gunned down June 12, 1963, in the family driveway. And I actually went by the home to see it for the first time, and I wanted to share this with you.
Hey, folks, we're at 2332 Margaret Walker Alexander Drive here in Jackson, Mississippi. And behind me is the home that was of Merle Evers and Medgar Evers. Now, of course, he was the NAACP's field secretary and Army veteran, of course, who was working to get voting rights and other civil rights on behalf of African Americans. And so, as you see here, this is a part of the Mississippi Freedom Trail. And so you see the sign here that exists that lays out in terms of the home here. And, of course, he was assassinated June 12, 1963. And this was placed during the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Rides, which took place in 2011. Now, if you come onto this side over here of the sign, what you will see is an explanation that this was a 3-bedroom home, and it was the first middle-class subdivision built by black developers here in Jackson. So there's lots of information here about, of course, this neighborhood, the home, but also Medgar Evers and who he was. And, of course, he... major leader. I mean, he was a huge leader here in Mississippi who gave his life on behalf of civil rights. And so what took place, folks, we're going to walk this way. And so what took place on the night President John F. Kennedy was giving a speech about the importance of a civil rights bill, what happened was Medgar Evers was coming home. His family was inside watching the speech. And then, of course, across the street, take a shot there. Take a shot across the street. Across the street, hiding behind in those wooded area there, was a white supremacist, Byron Della Beckwith. And so when Medgar Evers came home, he pulled into the driveway here. And then his car pulled in, and he went to the back of his car to get some items out of his car, some T-shirts and signs. And that's when the shots rang out that killed Medgar Evers. Of course, he was hit. Then, of course, he crawled his way up this driveway right here to the steps where his wife and his children came out. And, of course, it was horrible for them to actually see their husband and father shot and killed. And what you see here, of course, you see here, this, of course, is a National Historic Landmark. And so you see the sign right here that says that the bullet passed through Medgar's body and crashed through the lower left pane of the living room window. So the bullet went through his body and hit the window. And, of course, and it has all the details here. These photos were taken by the Jackson Police Department shortly after his murder. And you see an aerial shot as well where it took place. And so, and it says here that the aerial view shows the Evers home at the very top of the photograph. It depicts where assassin Byron Della Beckwith's car was seen earlier by witnesses at Joe's Drive-In. And, of course, spot number 2 indicates Beckwith's hiding place from which he fired the shot that killed Medgar Evers. And so, of course, as I said, it's a National Historic Landmark. And you see some of the other photos that are up here as well that marks. And so the image over here, this was the car that Medgar Evers was driving, the white car. And then, of course, he was shot. And then again, after he was shot, he made his way crawled under the carport to his family there. Why is this important? Because Medgar Evers was an American hero. Medgar Evers was a brother who gave his life for civil rights. And here we are in Mississippi, 2018. He was assassinated June 12, 1963. And it was his death that was one of the sparks that led to the 1964 Civil Rights Act and, of course, the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And this is a man who, again, gave his life. He was fighting on behalf of other black folks. He served his country, served in the military, bled, came home, but could not enjoy those same freedoms. And so here we are in 2018, U.S. Senate race. African-American Mike Espy is running for the United States Senate. The election will take place on November 27th. And for a lot of people out there, they say, well, I don't really see why it matters. The reality is it matters because we're standing on hallowed ground. We're standing on the very place where Medgar Evers died in order for people to have the right to vote. Now, you might not say that doesn't mean anything, but the reality is a wife, children lost their father in order for us to have the right to vote. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you think that politics doesn't matter. If you say you don't vote, then the ancestors like Medgar Evers are crying out because why did they give their lives in order for too many of us to stay at home, to sit on the couch, to complain, to say what should happen and what isn't happening? The reality is he understood the power of that ballot. And the reason he was assassinated is because people like him were scared to death of the day when black folks utilize that power. Folks, stay woke, be woke, and vote. In Mississippi, November 27th, every single black person in this state who is registered should be lining up at the polling station to vote because Medgar Evers gave his life to make sure you had the opportunity to do so.
All right, folks, that is it for us broadcasting live from Jackson, Mississippi. We certainly appreciate all the great hospitality we've had here, the Marriott Hotel, all the staff here. They've been phenomenal. Also, of course, the folks from the Prince Mason Lodge as well and the NAACP where we broadcast on yesterday. Thank you for all the guests that we have had. Thank you for also watching. Please be sure to share our content. First of all, we want you to keep supporting Roland Martin Unfiltered by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. If joining our Bring the Funk fan club, your donations to our fan club actually make this show possible. Make it possible for us to be able to be on the ground, traveling across the country, and then being able to share these stories, these critical stories with you. And so we certainly appreciate it. Tomorrow, folks, on the show, my special with actor, musician, philanthropist, producer, John Legend. The conversation we had in Los Angeles. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So we're going to be taking a little time off because of Thanksgiving. But so we look forward to you watching the John Legend conversation. And we'll also, of course, be sharing with you my discussion soon with Common and, of course, Nikki Giovanni, Lori Stokes, the book about her father, Louis Stokes, also Constance White, former editor of Essence Magazine, and her book. So we got some great stuff lined up for you. But tomorrow you'll be hearing from John Legend as I travel back to Washington, D.C. I want you to have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy your time with your families. Don't eat too much. You know what I'm going to have? Some gumbo. Y'all can keep the turkey. That's what I like. And so, again, please support us, Roland Martin Unfiltered. Go to our YouTube channel, please, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. Share our clips, watch our clips, join, subscribe to our channel as well. And why am I telling you to do that? Because here's why. I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you. There are 3 streaming channels out there: Facebook, Periscope, /Twitter, and YouTube. We actually generate more money from YouTube than the other platforms. And so those resources that we get also fund this show and make it possible for us to be completely independent, for us to be not corporately owned, and for us to be unapologetically black And that's why we do what we do. And so we certainly appreciate all of you. Thank Henry Peterson, Anthony Hampton. Also want to thank Allison Joyner, of course, for all working with us on the ground here in Jackson, Mississippi. Thank you so very much, folks. Y'all have a great time. I got to go. Holla!